If Australia and New Zealand tell us anything, it is that zero COVID was a psychotic idea. And I really can't believe that some countries pursued this ideology. You know, we were told for so long that Australia and New Zealand were doing things correctly. The UK was doing things terribly and it was a complete disaster. And now there's been a complete role reversal on that. And I actually think New Zealand in particular, because it has low levels of vaccination, New Zealand is almost in the same kind of situation that Britain was in March 2020. You know, there is a real prospect that COVID will take a hold of New Zealand, partly because they haven't developed any natural immunity. They haven't rolled out the vaccines sufficiently, and they've been pursuing this dogmatic ideology of zero COVID to the detriment of their economy and their health and the future of their country. So Australia and New Zealand, it turns out, may have done things completely wrongly, and we have to have a serious reckoning with that.
Well, that's one of the great ironies, Brendan, of zero COVID. It actually really encourages vaccine hesitancy because you've got swaths of the population saying, well, we don't need to be vaccinated because Jacinda Ardern or whoever the mad premier in the Australian states like Western Australia and Queensland are saying, you don't need to worry about COVID. We've got zero COVID. So they think, why do I need to take the risk of getting vaccinated? So it's only now that New Zealanders and Australians are actually starting to get vaccinated en masse.
That's exactly right. When you push this fantasy that people can be shielded from COVID forever and ever, then people do think to themselves, well, I don't need a vaccine. I don't need to take those kinds of precautions. My government will protect me for the rest of time. You create this real dystopian fantasy of officialdom looking after you forever. And that's why Shane Warne's intervention is so important. You know, Warne is absolutely correct. We have to learn to live with this virus. Once a virus is out there, once it is part of the family of human diseases, you've got two choices. You hide away from it for the rest of time, which is obviously completely unfeasible and will destroy your economy, or you learn to live with it. You learn to organize life around it. But, you know, one of the most frustrating things for people like you and me, Dan, is that if we ever raised any criticisms of lockdown, or if we ever said that zero COVID was a stupid idea, we were accused of wanting to let the disease run riot and we wanted people to die. It was never about that. It was about honestly thinking what is the best way for a modern society to cope with a viral infection like COVID-19. It was about having that kind of discussion. And the way Australia and New Zealand were used in other Western countries was as a way of shutting down that discussion and saying, no, these countries did it right, we did it wrong, end of debate. So I'm glad now that we are seeing that those countries have made mistakes, and maybe now we can have an honest appraisal of what we did right and what we did wrong in relation to COVID.
No, completely. You're completely right, because what the politicians did over there is point to us as awful madmen. You know, Boris Johnson, he wants to gift his population COVID for Christmas. You know, there was all of that sort of language, and of course it was rubbish. It was highly offensive, and all they've done is delay the inevitable. And as you say, they've delayed the inevitable without any form of natural immunity throughout the population, which means this thing is going to spread like wildfire. Do you know the irony, Brendan? Apparently, and I think we've got some footage of this, marches today taking place in New York City to save Australia, because they have been so concerned, these Americans, and I imagine a lot of them are expats, Australians, with what is going on in Australia. And, of course, you can't have a march like this in Australia. I mean, Brendan, this is a peaceful protest, isn't it? It's the type of protest that should be allowed to happen anywhere in the world. You cannot have it in Australia. So there they are, having it on the Australians' behalf in New York. And this is just an international embarrassment for Aussie, is it not?
Oh, completely. And, you know, the thing I have always loved about Australia is that it's a pretty robust country. It's not particularly politically correct. There are lots and lots of people there who are skeptical of the new authoritarianism, skeptical of wokeness, and skeptical of climate change alarmism. When I go to Australia, I've been 5 or 6 times. It's always so refreshing to meet people there who just don't buy into all of that kind of stuff. So it's really depressing now to see Australia become this tin pot tyranny almost. And as you say, they can't even march in the streets. And to my mind, even if, we can agree or disagree on what kind of policies are needed to quell a virus like COVID-19. But in my mind, to stop people from protesting is completely unacceptable. People always have to have the right to protest, to tell their government that they're wrong, and to express their opinions about what the government is doing. So the clampdown on the right to protest is deeply chilling in Australia. Another part of this problem, of course, particularly in relation to New Zealand, is I think Jacinda Ardern's hubris in relation to COVID-19, because that's what it was, an arrogance, a blind arrogance that she was doing the right thing, even though she clearly wasn't. The problem with that is that in the West, she is idolized as this kind of saint, this patron saint of woke politics, this Justin Trudeau style figure, this wonderful woman you must never criticize. And that also stymied any kind of discussion about what New Zealand was doing. So the lesson to take away from this, I think, is we need really serious, open, free discussion about the best way to tackle a virus like COVID-19, not nodding along to all these various authoritarian measures.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.